Okay, let's get started. A couple of, first the agenda. So we'll do a short round of introduction so you actually know who is who in this call. We'll do a short introduction of Planadigm as well as Pigment. Only a few slides. Then we have an extensive Q&A with Ankorstore, and we will let them tell what they gained out of the implementation of Pigment. And at the end, we have the Q&A based on the questions that you can ask during this webinar. Good to know is that for a couple of things, there is a Q&A box that you can see. If you have any questions during this webinar, please type them in and we will make sure that at the end we will answer those questions. If for whatever reason time permits, for example, that we cannot answer the remaining questions, we will share with all of you the answers to the questions by email afterwards, if not all the questions could be answered during this webinar. And then move on to the introduction. So my name is Jan Veerman, managing partner, one of the owners of Planadigm, consulting firm specialized in supply chain optimization and the implementation of supply chain use cases with Pigment. I have a long track record in the enterprise performance management space, worked before for Cognos, IBM and ION, and that also includes the implementation of several planning solutions for a wide range of customers around Europe. So long track record in the supply chain process improvements as well as the implementation of planning solutions. We move on to Thomas Bouvier, Director Operations at Ankorstore. And Ankorstore is the leading B2B marketplace in Europe, in charge of all logistics and customer service topics. He joined Ankorstore 3 years ago to build and launch a fulfillment service, offering their sellers to use Ankorstore warehouses to fulfill their orders. He's a former supply chain consultant with diverse experience in logistics network design and supply chain planning process and software implementation. And next is Alexis Buff, Head of Partnerships at Pigment. He has been in the planning space for years at various software companies, including SAP and Anaplan, and he's now in charge of partnerships at Pigment. So those three people you will see on stage later. A short one-slider on Planadigm. We offer 3 types of services, as you can see here, and the first one is the supply chain process expertise. So based on our expertise, we can support companies in improving their supply chain. We have quite a lot of experience in different industries across different types of planning and supply chain planning. So we can really add value there in optimizing supply chain processes even further. The middle part is the planning tool expertise. We focus on Pigment only, and based on this new type of functionality and platform, we can do quite quick implementations. We do supply chain only because that is where our strength and our expertise lies, and we are all certified of implementing Pigment, so we know how to implement it based on best practices and previous experience. And the other part of our service portfolio is interim, where you are in need for specific temporary operational support, demand planners, supply planners, for example. That could also include project and change management. That's Planadigm. And now let's move on to the short introduction of Pigment, and I hand it over to Alexis.
Thanks, Jan. So just a few slides about Pigment before we start discussing with Thomas about the Ankorstore project. So we are a software as a service company, really specialized in planning and performance management, right? And our objective is really to help our customers preparing for anything. That's our motto, right? And what it means for us is to be able to provide a comprehensive planning set of capabilities to serve the needs from finance, supply chain, sales, HR, so all the business functions of pretty much any customer. So what we have here on the screen is what we're trying to achieve in terms of the challenges we see at a high number of customers. So basically, when we talk to customers, what we see is that they have data sources, so typically transactional systems, data lakes, and so forth. They know what they want to achieve in terms of decision-making processes and outcomes. And in between, it's a little bit of a mess in a sense that the operating systems are very often siloed, right? Finance is using its own set of capabilities. Operations are operating on their side, HR working on a different system, and so forth. So everything is pretty much siloed and disconnected. We see point solutions. We see lots of Excel spreadsheets and Google spreadsheets. We see custom solutions, BI tools. So as you can imagine, it doesn't really enable our customers to form, intelligent decision and to collaborate across business functions. So that's really what we are trying to achieve with our platform, right? Not only answering the needs of a given department or business function like finance or operations, but also enable all the functions to collaborate and to share one single version of the truth. So that's what we see in the next slide, Jan. Right, one platform for financial planning, for sales planning, for HR planning, for supply chain planning, strategic finance, and so forth. The idea being to have one single version of the truth, right? When someone from the supply chain is having a conversation with the CFO, for instance, they share the same numbers and the same definition of what the KPIs are, typically the sales, for instance. It also aims at ensuring consistency between the way we plan in finance, in supply chain, sales, and so forth. And ultimately, the idea is to be more efficient and to be in a position to make faster decisions. Right. So, if I was to summarize the keywords about the Pigment value proposal or what we aim at providing our customers with, it's democratized data. What we've seen is that not only because of the silos, but also because mostly the planning people are accessing this type of solution. So it's important for us to be in a position where we can help our customers democratize data, meaning offering easy access to data to more and more people across the organization. So that's one point. The other one would be providing a very powerful modeling engine capable of answering the needs of modeling, not only of the one business function, finance, supply chain, and so forth, but the entire organization. So that's very important as well. Usability is key, and I'm sure we'll discuss that later on with the example of Ankorstore. If we want users to adopt the platform in order to plan and collaborate and so forth, the usability is really a key aspect. And I will just end up with the last point, which is about AI. Right? Everybody is talking about AI, but AI is absolutely a critical component of our roadmap. I was saying that our aim is and our mission is to provide our customers with a comprehensive planning platform, but really the strategy is to develop and provide our customers with an AI augmented planning platform. AI can be very useful, not only to help modeling, forecasting capabilities and so forth, but it's a key component of democratizing data as well, and that's it. Right. So we've been in the business for 3 years. Jan, if we can share the next slide, and we already have a few hundreds of customers of pretty much all sizes in all industries, right? And we have quite a few actually very good and loyal customers in the area of CPG and retail, which will be our focus this morning. And we are seeing when we are gaining traction and visibility on the market, thanks to the recognition typically by Gartner, for instance. We've been in the Magic Quadrant for financial planning. I would assume that operational planning will come next, but we are now in the Magic Quadrant, and we have more and more traction on the market, right? So I would like now to maybe invite Thomas to start asking questions about the Pigment project at Ankorstore, typically. The first question I would like to ask you, Thomas, is basically about the state of planning within supply chain prior to the launch of the project. What was the situation? What were the issues you were facing, the challenges, both technical or functional? And what would have been the implications of basically not launching your project.
Oh, you're on mute, Thomas. Oh.
No, we don't hear you, Thomas. Oh. So maybe Jan, since you happen to know,
Yeah, there you are.
Sorry for that.
So maybe let me ask the question again. I was wondering about the state, of where you were in terms of your planning capabilities, processes, and so forth prior to the launch of the project.
And thanks, Alexis, and thanks, Jan, and hi, everyone. And maybe before I can give a quick intro on Ankorstore, who we are, and indeed what's the context of the pigment use case and the planning use case for our operation. So Jan introduced it briefly. Ankorstore is a leading B2B marketplace in Europe. So we operate across different product categories. It's very cross-category, food, whether it's food and drinks, home and decoration, cosmetics, etc., kids. And we basically connect around 30,000 brands with about 300,000 independent retailers. So we partner with our brands to offer them a comprehensive set of tools and services to operate their B2B business. So of course, the marketplace services per se, meaning the prospecting, the capability to find a distribution network, but also logistic services, also financing and payment services, etc. So it's really not just a marketplace. We are building a marketplace and set a range of services to address the B2B ecosystem. And we are around 250 employees as of now. And from a supply chain standpoint, basically we operate around two main services. So we launched Ankorstore 5 years ago now with only a direct shipping offer. So direct shipping is when the brand, so the supplier, is directly handling the order preparation and shipping the order to the customer themselves, to the independent retailer. But even here in direct shipping, we can offer some transportation solutions. So the brand either uses their own carrier or uses an Ankorstore carrier contract. And we launched 2.5 years ago a fulfillment service, very similar to what we can find on other marketplaces, such as, of course, Amazon, Cdiscount in the B2C ecosystem. So basically, a fulfillment service is the capability to propose to some of our best brands to store their products, their stock in our warehouse that we launched, and then Ankorstore, on behalf of the brand, prepares and ships the order for the brands. And it's very in that context, in that fulfillment context, that we are talking about planning or supply chain planning, because when the brands put some inventory within our warehouse, well, in our team, in your internal team at Ankorstore, we have within the logistics team people in charge of those brands using the fulfillment service, and that are here to help the brands maximize the usage of this fulfillment service. So basically, we have we could call them in the industry supply planners. At Ankorstore, we call them inventory managers. They are in charge of a portfolio of brands and therefore a portfolio of SKUs that are stored in our warehouse. And the main goal of those planners is to help the brands maximize the usage of fulfillment, which means that concretely, we implemented a process where they share with their brands replenishment recommendations, replenishment suggestions of the quantity per SKU that they should put in the warehouse to be able to serve the demand. And this is the exact definition of demand and supply planning process. And we started really from scratch. We started to build an internal tool, Excel-based, to manage that planning process, which enabled us to grow at the very beginning. But we faced more and more challenges, of course, like any company would with Excel-based tools. Of course, a problem of scalability. As we speak, we have around 7,000 SKUs stored in the warehouse for more than 200 sellers, 200 brands. It was a bit less last year when we did the implementation project, but still it was 5,000 to 6,000 SKUs. And we have a team of 4 planners. So not easy for them to go one by one through all their portfolio and compute replenishment recommendations. We also had quality or reliability issues with our planning process, or accuracy issues, should I say, because we were not doing any demand planning process. We were not forecasting anything. We were just taking the average past demand to compute then a replenishment recommendation for the brand based on very simple supply chain parameters, like rough safety stock quantity, very high level lead times, etc. And finally, in terms of on the scalability part, well, the planners, they were using that internal Excel tool and then computing the replenishment recommendation and sharing it manually with an email to their brands. So basically, they were spending probably 1.5 to 2 days per week on that process, knowing that they had tons of other things to do. And as we were growing, because fulfillment last year it was accounting for something like 6 to 8% of the overall Ankorstore volumes. Now we are talking about 20% of the overall Ankorstore volumes as we speak. So of course it was growing and growing, so not possible at all to keep going with an Excel-based tool. So we clearly identified, I think it was probably mid-2023, that we needed a more robust planning software, or planning solution or tool to support that process. And then we decided to launch the call for tenders.
So thanks, Thomas, for this very comprehensive view. My next question would be fairly simple. Why Pigment? Why did you choose Pigment?
So we launched the call for tenders, as I said, and initially, to be very honest, we didn't even include Pigment in the call for tenders. Because I was in charge of that, and I didn't even know that Pigment was doing or could answer to our supply chain planning use cases. And so we consulted other companies, other planning companies, and then I got a message from our VP Finance at Ankorstore telling me, "Did you think of consulting Pigment?" Because actually, Pigment was already used at Ankorstore for FP&A, so for finance planning. So I told him, like, well, to my knowledge, they are not at all doing any supply chain, but I can ask for a demo. It doesn't cost me anything. So I requested a demo from Pigment, and I was literally blown away by the demo. I do not hold any share at Pigment, so I'm very honest when I say that. The demo was mind-blowing compared to other demos of similar tools I could have seen. And as Jan mentioned, I had a former experience in supply chain consulting of planning software implementation, so I know a little bit the market. And really, the power of the tool, the user convenience, the ergonomy, the flexibility was really next level. So we included Pigment in the request for proposal, and then we had a very let's say objective approach with different criteria to select our partner. Was like we looked at the business fit with our use cases. So we requested to make sure that all the use cases we had could be covered by Pigment. The easiness to integrate with. So really looking at also the tech architecture and the fit with Ankorstore and the tech ecosystem at Ankorstore. The ergonomy, how it would be accepted by the teams, the flexibility, as I said, the capability to internalize the knowledge also, that was very important for us. What would be the implementation setup, plan timing, of course, the budget, implementation, and licensing. And Pigment stood out in each and every criteria, ranked first on all criteria. So it was a pretty straightforward decision.
Thanks. So we understand better now what was the context of the project, what were the pain points and the challenges you were facing. We also understand now why you chose Pigment. Thanks for that. Let's talk about the project now. What was the project strategy? How did it go? And since obviously there is always some room for improvement in anything, if you were to start again the same project, what would you do differently potentially?
Yeah. So we launched the project in Jan 2024. We prepared it end of year 23, and we really launched it the implementation phase early 2024, and it lasted around 4 months, 3 to 4 months of pure implementation, and then the go live for our end users was something in May. So let's say 5 months from early stage of the implementation phase up to the actual go live. So the and maybe I will try to highlight also what were the key success factors in the first place, and then indeed, as you said, what we could have improved. It was very important for us to very early, so before the start of the implementation project, make sure of two things. One, the internal staffing of the project, and two, clarify as much as possible and as detailed as possible the exact scope. So Planadigm was already, we were already discussing a lot with them to define the project detailed planning, make sure we aligned on the exact scope and what we would ask Planadigm to help with. But number one key success factor was really staffing. Make sure that we dedicate enough time internally to ramp up on Pigment and as quickly as possible ramp up and get that capability to co-develop with Pigment and with the Planadigm. And that was the approach defined with Jan at the very beginning. It was a co-implementation between Planadigm that you will correct me, Jan, but so it was you plus one other consultant from Planadigm part-time. And within Ankorstore, we had identified very early 2 model builders, one project manager, of course, and then key users that were also end users, because we didn't have that many users, so we had 4 end users, which were also our key users. But the critical resource was the 2 model builders with very so first, make sure they can dedicate enough bandwidth. So both of them were staffed from 25 to 50% of their time on that project during 4 months. So we needed to allow them that workload and that bandwidth. And two, their profile as well was very important because we needed people to ramp up fast on Pigment. So we had one data engineer and business data analyst that was on the data team, so not within the operations, that was basically the owner of all the data model that we are going to build. Plus, the other model builder was within my team, within the operations team. It was our data and tools analysts for the operations. He was the guy who had developed our internal tool, Excel-based, before. So he had that detailed knowledge of our business processes. And at the same time, he is very hands-on and he can ramp up very quick on new tools. So that was the perfect setup to make sure we could ramp up very fast and split the work between Planadigm and Ankorstore. So number one key success factor, the team. Number two, the scope. We had defined very precisely indeed what we wanted to achieve, what would be the success criteria for that project. The very good thing was, again, that we had that previous tool existing, which served basically as a mock-up. So we had a pretty detailed idea of what we needed. We could base ourselves on that to define our business requirements, and also knowing what we need to fix. And we slightly changed it when we got into the detailed comprehension of what Pigment could do. Of course, we need to keep that flexibility to adjust based on the capabilities of the tool. But at least very quickly, or just at the start of the project, we already had our list of business requirements to be implemented. And then maybe number three, in terms of success factor, would be the close project steering that we had. So we had weekly follow-ups with detailed review of the planning, updated of the budget as well. We had a pretty strong budget constraint. We didn't want to go over budget. We had allocated a dedicated budget to that, and we made sure that we could always rebalance external developments with Planadigm versus internal ones, and we reallocated that along the way. Also, when we actually saw that our two model builders actually ramped up very quickly on the tool, we tried to re-internalize also some of the work and make sure we made the best value possible from the support of Planadigm in terms of using their expertise with Pigment and with Pigment implementation, how we could best use the tool to serve our needs. And also we tried to have a very pragmatic approach because in such projects, in such implementation projects, you can go very deep in the capabilities, but it doesn't serve anything if it's not used by the users. So again, our planning processes are not that complex at Ankorstore. It's pretty straightforward. It's one point of stock, it's demand, and then replenishment plan with very simple parameters. So we tried to keep it simple, knowing that we could make the tool evolve in the future, but to maximize the adoption at the very early stage. A great example of that is I told you we had around 6,000 SKUs on the demand planning part, so the demand forecasting. We very quickly realized that it was impossible to achieve great forecast accuracy on 100% of our SKUs. We have a lot of SKUs that don't have enough data points that have a very erratic demand. It's normal for every marketplace in the e-commerce industry. You have tons of SKUs that are ordered twice a year, for example. This is foolish to believe that you can compute a forecasting algorithm that would actually give you a good forecast accuracy for those products. So we very quickly decided that for all those SKUs with erratic demand, we would not try to even forecast the demand. We would just replenish them based on a very simple stock policy. So we cut some corners like that. And so all that computed, also knowing that we had Planadigm coming on site, and that was a good success factor, that we had them one day per week, or I think 1 day every 2 or 2 days every 2 weeks, depending on the timing of the project, to really sit next to our model builders and co-develop. The end result was that basically we kept the planning. We went live as planned within the allocated budget, and with a very good adoption. And we can talk again about the adoption later on. So to be honest, it's really want to outline that is that it's one of the very few implementation projects that I've seen go that well within planning, within budget, with the expected outcomes. Still, of course, there are always things that you can improve. I remember some very specific features, or maybe sometimes we spend too much time on some detailed features and not making sure that the overall process was handled well. So there were some let's say some anomalies that we discovered pretty late and that we had to come back on. But that was minor, let's say, considering and it's pretty normal for any implementation project of this type. So overall, not that many things that we would have made differently, to be honest.
And maybe to
Yeah, you want to complete, of course. Yeah.
Now, maybe to add on that from an implementation partner perspective, I haven't come across that many customers where the combination, like Thomas already mentioned, we do co-development always. We transfer our knowledge of how to implement Pigment to the people on customer side. So when the project is done, we are not needed for the day-to-day operation, and we haven't come across a implementation or a customer where the capabilities of the people who co-develop with us could pick up the Pigment environment that quickly, as well as, for example, the data handling. So you need data sets. So if we ask for a specific data set, it was within a few minutes when we had any, because the co-development team also was capable of deriving the right data sets out of the backbone. So that was really easy to connect with, to set up the next steps, to improve the model. And because of the fact that they were so fast in implementing on their own, with our guidance in the beginning, but in our own. So we stayed 2 days on site, and the week after we were remote, but we were able to then give them some homework. So for next week, these are the next topics for you to build. And from that point onwards, they could do their homework, and we were also online to make sure that if they were finding difficulties or having questions, that they could also connect to us quickly. But that was really one of the key factors indeed to make this project a success.
And you're right to underline the data, the data point. We could have lost weeks of back and forth on the data extracts that you needed to start building, and because also our data lake, our Google Cloud environment was pretty well structured in the first place. It helped us provide the right data sets very quickly, and then start as soon as possible on the business processes.
So in summary for our audience, the keywords here, right? Staffing, co-build, right, in order to take ownership of the models and to ramp up as fast as possible. So strong commitment from the customer to be heavily involved in the project. That's one. Manage your own business requirements, obviously. We mentioned about data quality and availability, which is critical to any project. You mentioned close project steering, which is obviously a good reason for success. You also mentioned adoption. I think we'll talk again about that a little bit later. And you also mentioned about being pragmatic in terms of defining the right compromise between the sophistication and the simplicity. Keep it simple and pragmatic and efficient. So thanks for that. So you've been live on Pigment for a few months now. So what are the main benefits for the business after a few months of operations? Did you address your challenges and pain points? Did you deliver the expected outcomes?
Yeah. So indeed, very quickly we covered the tool adoption part was a no-brainer. Within a month, we deprecated our previous tool. So our users went onto Pigment on a weekly or even daily basis within a month. And so we quickly addressed the scalability issue and the capacity to treat the planning process more with alerts than exhaustive review of the SKUs and manual actions. We really built a lot of functionalities within the tools within the tool alert based to make sure planners can quickly in one view know which actions they have to take to adjust the plan. And the accuracy, the forecast accuracy part also, which is pretty normal because again we didn't have any forecast process before, but the implementation of the very simple statistical forecast models and best fit approach that we defined. Again, within 1 month, I think the first cycle we were already seeing plus 20% forecast accuracy, and I think as of now it's more plus 35% accuracy versus the previous state. Because also we can refine the models and we have more data and more history, and the models are behaving better. On the scalability, we can still improve. Because part of the work until very recently was still pretty manual for planners, which is the exploitation of the result of the plan. So in Pigment, we do the calculation, we end up with the replenishment recommendations. But at the beginning, after the launch, the planners were still sending those replenishment recommendations via email to their brands. So similar as before. What we have done is, since very recently, it's a few weeks old, is automate that closed loop, let's say, automate the email recommendation to brands. And we still plan in the next months to come to actually really close the loop from a product standpoint, meaning that we would re-inject the replenishment recommendations directly in our IMS, or in our basically in our Ankorstore software, so that the brands can directly access that without having to go through emails anymore. So the scalability part we can still improve, and the time gain and productivity, let's say. But on the accuracy part, we are really where we want to be. So yeah, the results are clearly there, and we didn't have to wait months to see them. Really from day one, it was a massive improvement. You're muted, Alex.
Thank you. Did you also manage to measure the outcomes in terms of financial indicators, like the amount of cash flow that you've been able to free, or the level of inventories and so forth? Or is it part of what you would like to monitor in the future?
Yeah, it's a bit soon to tell. In a sense, yes, because again, as we are not holding the stock on our own. We don't buy the stock from brands. The owner of the stock in our warehouse is still the brands. We act as a logistician provider. So the impact in terms of stock availability, for example, the financial impact of that is more on the brand side than on our side. Still, we can measure it in terms of usage improvement of fulfillment of the fulfillment service. So we have a much better stock situations. I think we gained 5 to maybe 7 points year over year now of stock availability in the warehouse. And at the same time, we reduced the overstock situation by something like 15 to 20%. Which is basically what we always see in supply chain planning. Usually, when you have a bad supply chain planning process, you have one, shortages, and two, overstock, depending on the SKUs. And the goal is to reduce the shortages and also reduce the overstock on the dormant SKUs. So for that, we clearly improved. So that's let's say the most direct financial impact we can measure.
Okay, so it also makes you then an even better partner for
exactly.
for the brand.
And also trusted by the brands, and that's really important for us. Now that when we share those replenishment recommendations to brands, they actually trust us because they know we are better than them to define what they should put in the warehouse. And another KPI that we monitor is what we call the replenishment adherence, because again, as we are a third party, if the brand doesn't want to follow our recommendations, they can send us whatever they want. So we monitor how close the actual replenishments from the brands are from the recommendation. And on that, I think we were something like 20 to 30% adherence before, and now we are closer to 60% adherence. So we are much more trusted by the brands. And anyway, when they don't send us what we ask them to send us, usually it's not because they don't trust us. It's because either they don't have the stock, they have production issues, or things like that.
Thanks, Thomas. Jan, anything you want to add on top of what Thomas shared?
No, I think based on all the improvements made and the agility now in the increased agility in the process, it is a win-win situation for indeed the suppliers as well as for Ankorstore. So that should result in more sales as well. So top line results should also improve, I guess, in that case.
Yeah, exactly. That's the direct impact of maximizing the stock availability. It's maximizing the sell-through. Also, maybe I can highlight, because we didn't stop, let's say, the pigment evolutions after the go live. We also, because we have internalized that knowledge, we are also able to make improvements and updates of our of the usage of the solution we make. So we always can improve the way we use the tool. A very good example is the work we are currently doing to try to improve the forecasting models. As I mentioned, we were pretty straightforward in the implementation with, let's say, simple statistical forecast models. Now we try to investigate more and more on the machine learning side to enrich the forecast with more advanced algorithms. And another thing that we just deployed very recently, again, I think it was 2 weeks ago, is the component planning part, let's say, or MRP for the more supply chain experts of the audience. Because what we also manage in our fulfillment service and in our warehouse, we manage the procurement of packaging supplies as well, so carton, parcels, because we have specific needs in the warehouse with specific type of parcels that we order ourselves. And basically, what we wanted to do also is to leverage pigments to better forecast our consumption of carton, of those packaging supplies. And so, again, it was pretty easy to adopt that use case. Basically, we created bill of materials within Pigment directly. So it's basically the link between finished goods, so SKUs, and the carton that we use to pack each of those products. Which means that now we have a connected planning between the finished good, the SKUs, and translated into the need to replenish or to reorder the packaging supplies. So because we've had in the past some shortage situations of carton, which can be pretty critical in our processes. So we are now also able, since 2 weeks ago, to replenish and to forecast and replenish our packaging supplies with pigment.
Mm-hmm. So thanks. So I mean, you mentioned in your project strategy the co-ownership of the project and the ramp up and the strong willingness to be to gain autonomy in the way to create and your own models and so forth. So it really translates into what you said in terms of continuous improvement of the existing models. It also provides you with the ability to add new models down the road. But if we are looking at the future, are there any new models you would like to implement in the future? What's your view on the more global, and midterm journey with pigment?
Yeah. So I did mention the one thing that we have in mind, which is machine learning and enrichment of the forecasting models. That's one thing. The other thing that we envision as well. I did mention also that pigment is used also within Ankorstore for FP&A. So we have the supply chain use case, we have the finance planning use case. They are separate from now; they don't speak to each other. they should, or they could at least. So because we have on the FP&A side, we have our let's say more macro level budget and reforecast processes. We should at some point try to connect that to the supply chain planning use case to be able to better reflect those trajectories within our more detailed forecast, SKU per SKU forecast. So connect the top down to the bottom up approach and have some consensus forecast process. So that's something we want to explore at some point as well. The good thing is that we have designed the implementation to allow such things. It's the same environment, it's just different workbooks or sub environments, let's say. But we will be able, if we want to, have those two use cases speak to each other.
That's really good to hear. Thanks for that. Maybe it's time to take some questions from the audience. So I see a first question. I think you alluded to that already, Thomas, but the question is the following: is Pigment easy to learn for the developers/users?
So I would say yes. I mean, we really have to distinguish the two parts of the question: model developers or model builders and end users. I think the answer is yes for both. But for model builders, I mean, it still requires to have model builders that have that competency and willingness to dive into a new tool and that are that love playing with data and data models. But again, comparing that to other similar tools, the speed at which they ramped up, even though we can say they are brilliant people, but still, it shows and demonstrates how easy it is to master as a model builder, and as an end user. Again, it's one of the best similar tools that I've seen in terms of ergonomy, usability, capability to use filters easily, to drill down, to come back up, and again, the tool is so flexible that we build it based on the actual need and based on how we want the end users to use it. We are not bounded to any predefined way of using the tool. So because it's so flexible, we can ensure that we maximize the adoption.
Yeah. To add to that, that is developers who are quite capable in Excel, for example, to create lookups, pivots, had the same type of terminology used. Pigment platform uses functions, and it's the same terminology. So someone who can create a fee lookup also understands how to do that in Pigment. And Pigment offers what they call learning path. That's some sort of call it a certification, basic stuff that you learn on how the Pigment blocks, Pigment uses blocks like dimension, transactions, metrics. So basic stuff that follows a specific path where it becomes more difficult in the end. But afterwards, you at least have the basic. And so we always say to co-developers, please take that learning path first. So at least you have it as an online environment that they can access once you have a Pigment account. You can go through anytime, any place, anywhere. And once you have gone through the process, it's much easier then for them to get started, and then additional knowledge transfer is done in the project.
As some of the audience have joined during the presentation, Thomas, would you mind going through again through the main drivers for success of this project?
Yeah, sure. If you try to summarize. So again, what we highlighted, one, the staffing of the project. Make sure you identify the model builders very early and that you allocate enough time for them to dedicate to the project. They need to be data driven. They need to, and they need as much as possible to have that double competency, data and supply chain. That's ideal. I know it's not a role that exists in every organization, but if you can, it's very, very valuable. So staffing, clear definition of the scope, as much as you can. Try to have a mock-up of what you want to implement, even if it's Excel based. I mean, it's better than nothing, because because the tool, I mean, the downside of having a tool that is so flexible is that if you don't know what you want to implement, I mean, there are so many possibilities that, I mean, there are not that many preset or workbooks or environments that you can use. So you need to be very specific on what you expect. So clear definition of the scope, and then what you want to achieve, and close steering as much as possible. Also, make sure you have on-site touch points between the implementation team, external, internal, and to ensure that we ramp up on that code development approach that is very critical for success. And we also highlighted the data quality topic. Ensure that, again, as quickly as possible, even before the project starts, you identify all the data extracts that are needed to start building. Otherwise, you can lose half of the project to align on the data, and that's as much time as you do not spend on the business process.
And just to make sure that everybody's on board, relating again to the previous question, which was about how easy is it easy to learn for developers. Just wanted you to confirm that being in IT is not a prerequisite, right? So you mentioned that it's required to understand, I mean, how data is managed within your organization, what can be made available, and what may be the constraints with regards to data quality and availability, right? But that's not technical per se. And then you need to understand the business requirements, right? But you don't have to be a coder or developer, or, there is not any IT related prerequisite.
No, and for me, it's even better to dedicate a resource that is first knowledgeable in terms of business processes, plus have that also has that let's say data approach, and that is at ease with data and data models. That's ideal, but it's really easy to learn, and it's better to have someone that knows how to define a safety stock, or how how to define a statistical forecast model, etc. Than having someone that would be very knowledgeable from a tech standpoint, but not that close to the business, and lose that connection between the implementation and the business part. So yeah, for me it's even better to be more on, to dedicate someone that is more on the operation side. We had both. We had, as I said, one person within operations and one on the more on the tech side, the data engineer. But yeah, it's really not a prerequisite to be a coder. For sure.
Very clear. Thank you, Thomas. And the last question I see in the field, actually, you already alluded to it a number of times, but at the beginning of the presentation, it's about the reasons why you selected Pigment over, the competition.
Yeah. So again, a range of criteria. Of course, the business fit with the use cases, but that was not the main differentiator. I mean, other planning solutions could have the same fit. The integrability with our tech environment, and that was by far one of the main decision criteria, because it supported the native connection with Google BigQuery, for example, and we have all of our data on Google BigQuery. So the tech fit. Of course, the budget, both implementation and licensing, and ergonomy and capability to have that tool easily accepted by the team. So we also showed the demos to our future end users to have their first view on it.
So thanks, Thomas. It seems that we are reaching the end of the presentations. Hand over to you, Jan, for maybe a few words of conclusion.
Yeah. Thank you, Thomas, for the elaboration on the project, the implementation. Alexi, for asking the questions. Yeah, like I said in the beginning, this is one of the success stories where when you start, you cannot dream of. But we really like the interaction with the team on site as well. We had some tough discussions once in a while, but in the end, that also helped in improving, besides the tooling, also on process side. And you do see that a lot, that based on the functionality and the ability of modeling things fast in Pigment, you can then show, this is how you want to have it, especially for companies where they do not know where to go. You can easily show some boards and say, this is what you want, and then you can still change it along the way. That's very easy, but yeah, it was a very nice implementation also from our end to do. We love the interactions, and yeah, the afterwards it was a great success. And I assume that the platform also allows Ankorstore in their future growth, because you probably will have a strategic point where you need to go to provide or connect more suppliers, more products on the platform that should be able to, the Pigment platform should be able to cover that as well.
Totally.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for your very detailed testimonial. I think it was very useful for the audience, and it's always very nice for a software vendor like Pigment to to see partners and customers like Ankorstore happy with the choice they've made, right, and the investment. So thanks again, and looking forward to meeting you again in the near future.
Thank you, Alexi, for the invitation, and thanks, Jan, also for organizing that.
Thank you all.
And thanks to the
Have a
audience.
good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.